Hey everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the Fly Oz Backcountry Training Series. Our goal is to take a series of tricky backcountry flying topics and break them down step by step. This initial series of videos will focus on advanced takeoff and landing techniques, both in tailwheel and nosewheel aircraft, starting off with the foundational skill of all backcountry flying, the spot landing. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Lucas. I teach backcountry flying in the Ozarks, Northwest Arkansas. I hope to share some of the tips and tricks that I picked up along the way, as well as some of the many ways that I have screwed up in the process. So let's get started and talk about one of the most misunderstood but important topics in backcountry flying, and learn how to hit that point. Let's start out with a quick video of a spot landing on runway 17, our grass strip here at Bentonville. And for the sake of this poor husky, I really don't want to drag my tailwheel over the concrete marker at the beginning of the runway, so we're going to try to touch the tailwheel down just past the marker, and then use maximum braking effort to get stopped as soon as possible. So we've got a nice slow approach here, followed by the flaps coming out on touchdown, followed by max braking, followed by the stop. That's a lot at once. So let's check that out again, this time from inside the cockpit. That's all well and good, but the question is, how does it work? So let's break it down step by step, starting with angle of attack theory or flying the wing versus an approach that's based on airspeed. Probably the most common error that I encounter with students attempting to learn to spot land is that they're trying to hit some magic airspeed in order to nail their spot. The problem is that airspeed changes pretty drastically with weight, with aircraft configuration, whether you have VGs, droop tips, etc. We can get much more consistent spot landings by learning to fly the wing, or really what we're trying to do is to get the aircraft on the induced drag curve and keep it there all the way to the ground. So in this diagram you can see that there's a point as we slow where the predominant drag force stops being parasite drag and starts to be induced drag. Usually this happens around VG or L/D max, the point where the aircraft would glide the farthest. So what we want to do is we want to find ourselves somewhere along this induced drag curve, slower than best glide, but faster than our stall speed. That way we're achieving our aiming point using power, and when we get down to our aiming point there will be just enough energy left for the flare, but not so much that we float. So we can actually visualize this angle of attack by looking at the wing and its angle relative to the horizon. This initial angle represents what you would typically see on a normal approach to landing. The wing is angled down relative to the horizon. As we slow on the approach by adjusting our pitch, you can see the wing go past level with the horizon onto a slightly positive angle. Now this is the angle that we want to keep for our approach to landing in the Husky. So now we're visually established on the induced drag curve, and the magic of this is that this should work just about the same in any GA aircraft. So now that we're established on the induced drag curve, we hit our aiming point by adjusting our apparent impact point with the throttle. Apparent impact point referring to the point that it looks like the aircraft would hit if we just flew it into the ground on our current glide path. Note that in this graphic, the apparent impact point is signified by a white X, and the aiming point is signified by a red rectangle. If we see our apparent impact point starting to creep towards us, we add power to correct for that and move it back up to our aiming point or just slightly before the aiming point. On the other hand, if our apparent impact point starts to move away from us, we reduce power and bring it back where we want it. So breaking down that spot landing from earlier, first take note of the positive angle of attack on the wing on the approach. As we approach our intended landing point, there's just enough energy to lower the tail and slow our descent for the impact. Then immediately after the touchdown, we dump the flaps in order to kill our lift and keep the aircraft on the ground. Then it's firm braking to stop, just firm enough that the tail comes up slightly, but not so much that we endanger ourselves with a prop strike. Now let's check it out from the inside. During the approach, we use constant power changes to make our apparent impact point match our aiming point. In addition, it's pretty gusty today, so I'm having to work the stick pretty hard to account for the gusts, since when our airspeed is this slow, our control surfaces get much less effective. Right before the aiming point, our throttle goes to idle and we flare, and the flaps come out the second that the main wheels touch. Then as we brake, we tuck the stick back into our gut to try to keep the prop out of the dirt. Be cautious as you slow because the elevator's authority to keep that tail pin down is going to decrease, and it's likely we'll have to let up on the brakes to keep our nose from coming dangerously low. And as you might imagine, these techniques should be practiced first with a qualified backcountry instructor. Thanks for joining us today. Whether you're a pilot looking for backcountry training, an aircraft owner looking for information on Ozark strips to fly into, or potentially looking to charter a flight into the backcountry, check out flyoz.com for more info. In coming videos, expect to see content on specialty landings and maximum performance takeoffs, and soon after we'll venture into some of the techniques used to assess an off-airport landing area, non-standard approach techniques, and hazardous strip operations. We'll see you next time, so fly safe.